At this point in time, I think the best strategy is to basically promote as many progressive candidates as possible so that a good progressive candidate isn't the odd voice. And
But
what I
what
believe
does
is happening,
progressive mean?
well, somebody that's for healthcare for all,
Hmm.
real healthcare, not an insurance program,
Well, that's what
not
we have to be
pipeline.
careful about. It's the progressive. That's what worries me. It's every
Yeah,
candidate that tries to present themselves as if they're going to be progressive, and they're really not. And I
right.
think people
We can't
are,
have somebody pushing the best insurance program we can
yeah,
get.
right. Like we talked quite a bit about Gillum kind of changing the way he was speaking about it. From I forget the exact wording, but it was like first it was Medicare for all, and then it was I don't know, moving towards that, which, you can do the translation. It means I'm going to do what the insurance companies tell me to do.
And on our part, we need to be just as brutal as we were to Gillum. I mean, he was getting donations from across the United States. Hillary
Hmm.
showed up. He changed his tune on healthcare. Everybody said,
Yep. Right. Exactly.
and
Well,
that's
that's.
exactly how brutal we need to be. We need to be brutal against Dianne Feinstein for her attack on those kids.
Oh, right. Hi. How's it going?
Oh, not bad. How is
Okay.
everyone doing this evening?
Pretty
Good, good.
good. I'm just getting everything shared out. I'm going to be brave and put the Zoom link up in a few places. It's been a while since we had nasty
Oh, boy.
trolls, so
Uh,
everybody
it's
ready?
that season again.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. It is.
It's that
Well,
season again.
we're opening with the debate about Bernie running and kind of the progressive versus. Well, I wanted to get into the whole concept of vote shaming that I'm seeing again is already ramping up.
Oh, you know, we just had to go. We couldn't even wait until like month 2. Like we're already in this.
Right.
It's like right off the bat.
Well, that's good. Wait, hang on. Let me mute this. There we go.
And it's really sucks because honestly, we're kind of at a weird spot where we've got not one, not two, but actually 3 half decent choices.
What's going on with your screen there? That's
Mine?
pretty funky. Something's going on with your
That
screen.
looks like a loose wire.
Huh.
Mine?
That looks like you have a loose USB wire.
Yeah, it might be the camera wire. Oh no, it's just the keyboard.
Okay.
Keyboard shouldn't do that. That should be actually the camera USB. See if it's stuck in there. Or are you using a laptop?
No, I'm using a shitty Logitech
Okay.
camera.
Check to see if the USB is all the way in.
Yeah, it's all the way in.
Notice it has to do with the. Is that what you see? I see the green is being repeated, or the light colors. See the window and.
Yeah, I mean, I do see lines on my coming from my video feed.
Okay.
But hey, look, as long as it's not resulting in a how do we get to the moon if we can't talk between 3 buildings scenario, I think I'm gonna call this good enough.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna find.
Also, this is I hope I haven't tempted fate by invoking Gus Grissom's last words, because the last thing I need is a fire breaking out on a carpeted room.
All right, I'm gonna share something. I've never had someone, blow up a tweet of mine, underline something I said, and make a big graphic out of it. I guess I should be.
Ooh, welcome to the internet, Kelly.
I guess I should be flattered. Somebody
Really?
gives a shit enough of what I had to say to make a big stink about it. But here we go. Let me show you. If I can.
Well, welcome to the internet. People are going to
Right.
make big
Hang
stinks
on.
out of
Oh, I know.
really nothing.
Okay, here we go. Well, I will get into. How much of this do I want to get into? I'm not sure. I think I'm just going to
Let's
stick
do
to this.
all the things.
I'm just going to stick to the underlying part because I want to. This is kind of the gist of the vote shaming and the whole thing I'm seeing already ramp up since, well, this actually happened before Bernie announced that he was running again. But so I should have chosen my words differently, but I don't think, I'm not saying I'm anti-Bernie. I am a former Sanders supporter. Now, me personally, where I stand on this, on supporting Bernie, but someone pointed this out and said, like it was it was a terrible thing because I'm a former Sanders supporter. Whatever.
Yeah, I feel like that seems like a bit of an overemphasis. Just for me. I mean no disrespect to Gator here, but this feels like a fucking reach. Speaking of fucking reaches, I've got one I have planned to rant about in a few minutes, but just to
well, I will address that, but go ahead. I'm going to come back to what you just said because I am going to address something that he said, and we've followed each other for quite some time. I don't know him personally, but
I've talked with you long enough that I feel like this is a fucking reach on his part because
well, it's because of other things.
Because we're the quote unquote former Sanders supporters doesn't necessarily mean that we don't. Doesn't necessarily mean that we've all but abandoned the guy.
Right.
Not completely, at least.
Well, I'm on the fence.
My thought was that, judging from our conversation, is most of us are still somewhat okay with Bernie. We're just kind of frustrated with certain positions that he's taken in the last couple of years, and that's okay. Like, I don't think that's an unusual or terrible, awful thing to happen. It's a natural part of people developing in terms of their politics as they get more information and as they grow older as people. I mean, how many of us were in the same position in 2014 as we were in 2016? Much less where we are now.
Well, I'll go further than that. So when I said I'm a former Sanders supporter, I was a very enthusiastic Bernie supporter, like many of us, right? But I just mean that I'm not active. Honestly, I haven't really paid much attention to what Bernie has said for the past over a year and a half, going on 2 years. Quite frankly, for me, as soon as he turned around and endorsed Hillary, I was not in that camp. I voted Green, and I was very disappointed. But that being said, I also have respect for people. I know two people personally that are very, we know, actively supporting Bernie. Oh, I don't have my Peter douche mug. But Pat the Burner and Savage Joy. Now, I'm not about to vote shame them and say you shouldn't vote for Bernie. I think that's the wrong thing to do to anybody. Okay?
No, I wouldn't do that either.
Right. But my feeling on it is that I'm not against Bernie, but I will sit back and wait and see what happens. Because, and here, one of the things I think we should really watch for is it's too early. What is, he's been accused of sheep herding people, right? Back in the party. You guys all heard this, right? Well, okay. John hasn't. So it's basically, there are people that feel like the whole thing was orchestrated. That Bernie, the whole purpose was for him to, corral people back into the Democratic Party. The big switcheroo, oh, we'll just vote for Hillary. And everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of us said, what?
That's a fucking reach.
For me, for me, I'd as soon vote for Mitt Romney as I would Hillary Clinton. So that was just not happening. But anyway, there are people that believe that. There are people that don't believe that, but they still think, he betrayed people. He betrayed everyone by just saying he didn't, run as an independent or whatever. And so now, I think for the past year and a half, going on 2 years, as soon as he started parroting a lot of the Russiagate stuff, I really tuned out. I'm not against him, but I'm not a gung-ho supporter either. And I want to see what happens. One of my big things I want to see is who's he going to choose as a running mate? Like, I'm a little suspicious. Like, is this kind of like some kind of gimmick going on to corral people back in? I don't know. I mean, I think that Bernie would fight for things more than any other candidate we've probably ever had. Domestic, economic policies. I think that's just what he would do. But is he going to just have the same, what was damn it. The whole Wall Street, basically the cabinet that was pre-set up for Obama before he even got into office, right? I mean, is this just going to be that's probably going to be the same thing, right? What is Bernie really going to fight against if he's still within the system? So that's my take on it, but I'm not against him. So anyway, that got underlined like as if I'm...
I think a healthy amount of skepticism, put aside whether it's warranted or not, just for a quick second. I think a decent amount of skepticism towards any politician, I think, it's just a healthy position to take. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about people who we're tossing thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars at to take a position that we think may or may not better the country.
Speaking of
whether or not putting aside anything else for just a second, I think having a little bit of skepticism about others' motives for being involved in the game, I think it's a fair and healthy thing.
But I think we have more than a little bit.
Whether you support Tulsi Gabbard or whether you support Bernie Sanders or any number of one candidate, from Kamala, I hate to use this, but like you could go from Kamala Harris to Dr. Stein. But at the end of the day, the only way we actually are able to vet the candidates is if we're willing to take that critical eye towards them. And even if we like them, for whatever reason, I don't think that suspending critical thinking is in any way a sensible policy.
Right, and never a good idea. Now, I think the Democrats have decided, we're just going to do what the Republicans did last time and have this clown car full of, as many candidates, and just one of them will stick. If we just have some, we just throw them all out there, something will stick. But look, Bernie... Yeah.
I mean, it worked.
Bernie I'm sorry, there is more than a little skepticism warranted in this case. Okay, I haven't looked into this recently. Where's all that money that was donated to Bernie? I mean, whatever happened with that, I think that just got absorbed into the Democratic Party. That pisses me off. It does. I didn't want that money to go. That was, I mean...
Yeah, I suspect that... and this may just be pure hypotheses on my part, but while we were among the more ardent of Sanders' initial supporters, most of us have sort of tuned out of the Our Revolution infrastructure pretty early on in the process. So perhaps, so this is just speculation on my part, but it could be possible that behind the scenes, after some point after we left, they've been doing some more organizing that we may not have caught on to, which is completely possible because at this point, the progressive left is sort of disasperated into various different factions, unions, syndicates, and so on and so forth. So it wouldn't surprise me in the least. While you have one group CFAR doing one thing, Occupy Democrats doing another, or Our Revolution doing a third thing somewhere out there. Mm-hmm. That was happening pretty early on, just with the whole Justice Democrats fiasco.
Right.
So to me, the idea that Sanders has actually been building up infrastructure during the past 3 years since the election to solidify his ground game wouldn't surprise me in the least. In fact, that's what I suspect that he's been doing, especially with the some of the endorsements that he gave out during the 2018 election. So now, I mean, for goodness sake, the guy somehow managed to get Patrick Leahy, of all people, to be his first fucking endorsement. I don't even know how you manage that.
So, like, John, you looked a little puzzled when I said that made me angry about where the money. Just speak of what's your thought on or.
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit surprised from my perspective. What the DNC did to Bernie was the more offensive thing that I saw, and he really didn't address it at all.
Nope.
And I'm wondering about the vote shaming that you talk about when you talk about Bernie. Are those what is their concern? I mean, if Bernie's bringing forward the progressive issues that people care about, what's the concern for supporting the person that's pushing forward the issues? Are they afraid they're taken from the Democrats party, the Democratic?
Oh, you mean if they're not supporting, like they were saying, they were highlighting that I said I'm a former Sanders supporter. So you're saying, why are they attacking me? Is that your question?
Yeah, I mean,
because it's not like because the way I see it, we're not on opposite sides here. We may be supporting, some of us may be supporting different candidates, but all the same, we're still moving towards the same goals. We still have the same.
Well,
most
we
of
may
us
be
have the same basic policy positions. So to me, this isn't a contest for us to have an infight with one another. What this is an opportunity for us to get the establishment on multiple fronts. If we and I feel like the tendency for the possibility for infighting. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be concerned or skeptical. I am of the opinion, though, that people need to avoid looking at this whole scenario as a zero-sum game, which is why I take issue with Gator's comments here.
Well, that goes, and I posted the YouTube link. I doubt he would come on here. I really, typically, I don't like, no, I've never talked to him. We've followed each other, but I've never spoken to him. I do know that he supported Gillum. Anyway, I don't like to talk about people when they're not here. I really don't. I'll just point out what was said on Twitter, because I'd rather people come on and say, unless you're really, really a public figure. I don't know. I just don't like to do that. But the reason I jumped in this thread at all, and I don't normally do this, but, I was down in Broward County, and I've met a lot of people, met Tim Canova and people on his campaign. And so I guess it's a little bit personal for me, because I think he did a lot of things that Bernie wouldn't do. And, and now he's being attacked by some people. So let me find this tweet, actually. It's going to take me a minute, I didn't think to pull this part up. But he took a picture. Well, let me describe it, and I'll find it while you guys talk. So he took a picture, a couple of tweets of Tim's, and one of them, Tim has on a red hat, but it's like some local school board person. And
what was he trying to construe that Tim Canova was some kind of magnet?
You got it.
For fuck's sake.
You got it.
Look,
and you know what, though? You know what? I commented, I said, you just lifted that from the BBC, where they took Jeremy Corbyn and photoshopped his little cap and put on a Russia fur hat. I said that wasn't very original. And I just couldn't help it. I jumped in and said something about that, and then it kind of kept going, and the subject, veered off to various things, and I made the comment about being a former Sanders supporter. But my issue with that tactic is, first of all, it's his business to support Gillum. It's anybody. I mean, I don't think anybody should vote shame anybody else. You can disagree with, think they're uninformed. But I don't think anybody should do that. But what that segment is doing is they're kind of joining a lot of the Democrats. One I mentioned recently on live stream, John. in being really pissed off at people like me that refuse to fall in line and vote for that establishment Dem because it's better than the Republican. So those people are now they're only just like one step away from that. And so he's, to go on and attack Tim Canova when, he took the picture and his tweet was nothing to do. It was something about this local school board guy. He has the red hat on, and he writes in the comments, he says something about another tweet that he says that was a little bit, I can understand the problem with it a little bit. But anyway, he says, next thing you know, Tim will be pushing something and wearing a MAGA hat. And over here, you see the picture, and it's like, it was so obviously crafted to be a smear, right? And if you didn't look closely enough at it, you would think he was wearing a MAGA hat. And it just pissed me off, and I had to jump in and say something because it was just obviously a smear. And then he took my tweet and highlighted it, I guess, to smear me because I'm a former...
Did Jeff post this smear?
Huh?
Did Jeff post this smear himself, or did...
Yes. Absolutely he did.
Fuck him. Fuck off. No.
Well... Yeah, and then... I don't...
Just for a second. Bro, this is really disappointing because Gator knows better. He knows what was going on in Florida. I know he knows what was going on in Florida. I don't know how Tim's politics have involved. Maybe there's something I don't know about the climatology in Broward County that I'm unaware of. But as far as I'm concerned,
Tim has not gone MAGA. He's just refusing.
He hasn't. Okay, let's phrase it this way: he hasn't gone H.A. Goodman.
No,
he has not gone full Goodman.
No, but see, that's another thing. Look, we have such a divided. Look, there are things I've never voted Republican. I have Republicans in my family, but there are things that I understand. I don't agree with it, but I understand why they vote that way. Yeah. And like in Tim's case, there were some Republicans that were willing to fight with him, for election integrity. That doesn't make you MAGA. That doesn't make you a Trump supporter.
No.
So you're on the same page on an issue. Great. Let's get something done for a change.
Like, let me phrase it like this: if I got into arguments with every person every teacher in Oklahoma who didn't vote blue, let me tell you something. The 2016, the teacher walkout last year would have flopped like a goddamn fucking fish.
Yeah, we have to. I often just feel like standing up in some of these places I've been at conferences and stuff and just yelling, you guys do realize Trump won, right? Like, there's just this sort of like these blinders on that people have, and they don't want to look at, why is this the case? Why, when you look at, recently I was looking at some different indie media that I ran across on Twitter, some people on the right, and they have huge followings. Huge. Like double what Jimmy Dore does. They're entertaining, they're, crude and awful in a lot of ways, but people are following them and listening to them. And why is that? We're just going to stay in our little bubble and not pay attention to why that is. Why are people voting that way? They're all just racist pigs, or is it's populism? I think largely it is just people. It's the economy, stupid, in a lot of cases. That's what it is. And it's people fed up with the establishment, and even though it's misguided, they see Trump as being anti-establishment, and the Democrats continuing to push establishment stuff. So
it probably doesn't help when you're literally running CIA candidates.
Right, exactly.
As your candidates. That probably does not help that impression.
Well, okay, and we can get into, we always get into Russiagate stuff. Did anybody read John Kiriakou article in Consortium News?
I have not.
About McCabe?
I've been keeping my barometer mostly focused on seeing how the 2018 field has been developing, which I have to say, has been a very interesting show to witness. Although I do find it a little bit strange in a few regards, because as I see it right now we have a very interesting trifecta that is sort of brewed. Between what I see as the three most likely candidates to beat Trump. Not necessarily to survive the primary. I must stress that this is not necessarily to survive the primary, but who I feel has the best shots at beating Trump.
Okay.
And that is, it basically boils down to three people: Bernie, Tulsi, and Andrew. And I'll explain my thoughts as to each of them.
Okay.
As far as now, Bernie is kind of the obvious one. He's run once, so he already has name recognition. He has probably the most significant ground game. The guy, in the sense that this guy has had a political action committee that has been politically active for the last two cycles, and have had the time and have put in the time and volunteer effort to be able to develop the skills necessary to run a successful potentially run a successful ground game. I mean, the guy raised $6 million in donations. Now, where those sources came from have yet to be disclosed.
Where exactly is that from? Was that?
So we'll wait and see. I would not be surprised. I would not discount, however, Bernie's popularity. I can say this from barometering my own friends who supported Sanders in the past.
You think they are on board again?
The energy is still is still there for Bernie. So I think among millennials, at least young people, they're going to recognize Bernie first, and that's where they're going to start throwing their dollars towards. So
I think you're right, but
I think Bernie actually has a really good shot actually at winning. Not only that, but he has shown that he can in the past that he is willing to go toe to toe with Trump on his own ground. And
can I ask, what are the issues that Bernie makes attractive? I mean,
it's the same basic platform as he had in 2016. There really isn't any major update to his
Medicare for all.
So Medicare for all, free college tuition. God, there was and I wouldn't be surprised if his criminal justice reform package is going to be recycled from 2016. Maybe some minor updates to include LGBT community concerns. But beyond
those
that,
are the top ones.
Those would be the ones that I would suspect. No, there is one. There is one I was forgetting. Reduction of corporate influence in elections. So probably something similar to a sort of wolf pack strategy might be on the horizon. Now, that's the obvious thing is that so that's Bernie's strengths. Bernie's weaknesses, as they are right now, is that the same attacks that pretty much effectively sank him in 2016 are still on the table in 2020, and that I'm not just talking about media. I am talking also about the institutional problems. However, it does seem Bernie is attempting to nip that bud early on, given that he managed to get Patrick Leahy's support, which
Can you explain that? What are those weaknesses? You said institutional weaknesses. Can you describe that?
All right. So one of Bernie's biggest problems is that he's not recognized within the Democratic Party as a member of the Democratic Party. That's his biggest weakness. The sad part is that the Democrats are still kind of are still butthurt tribalists who still think that he had stood up to Queen Bee, and that's why they did not get the White House in 2016. So there's a lot of people still pissed at him for that. And
yeah.
So Bernie's biggest problem is that he's tied to 2016, and that's going to be a huge problem for him in terms of getting Democrats. Because I guarantee you, there are plenty of Clintonistas who are ready to tell Sanders to kiss their intersectional ass before they would ever choose to vote for him.
But see, I wonder. Oh, sorry, John. Go ahead.
Well, is it just that animosity about what happened in the primary between Hillary and Bernie, or are there issue differences? I heard this earlier.
It's both. It's both. It's both the issue differences and the pettiness.
What's the issue differences?
Let me explain something. The real problem with Bernie, and the real problem that Democrats, particularly Hillary Democrats, have.
Right now,
during the debates, that's the real problem they have with him. He was just he told everyone, "I want to hear about your emails." You know, he was too much of a gentleman. That's the problem. They didn't give him. He did.
Hey, Brian, are you on a different whatever channel or something? You're freezing up again.
Am I? Oh,
I don't know. It hasn't happened in a while.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, they switched me. Hold on a second.
Every time, Brian. Every time you're making a point.
Yes.
Yeah.
That used to happen all the time in the middle of
that should be better. Okay, what I was saying is that it's that Bernie didn't give them enough to attack. That's what they're pissed about. He was too much of a gentleman. He was too accommodating of Hillary, and that's the real problem they have with it. Is that he didn't give them enough meat.
Who would have thought that being too nice in politics would make people hate you?
But
that is what it is.
Let's look at what might be happening right now. Let's look at this realistically. This popped in my head the other day because a friend of mine that used to be part of the Draft Bernie group was over. He's like 23. And you said something about millennials are still, on board with Bernie. I just picture the DNC sitting back and going, this is a branding thing, okay? Bernie's old. To me, I don't think his age really matters. I think he's full of energy, he's together and whatever. But let's face it, most of the country is going to consider him too old. I think I can just picture this like, how do we sort of get people into the Democratic Party and have them stay there? Because really that's what it's all about. It's like pick a lane and stay there. And you don't look at the issues, you just brand, and they can get all these millennials back into the Democratic Party by putting Bernie up again. It's just, I hate to sound so conspiracy about it. To me, there's so much that it's about branding. Why else would they? So many of them in there don't like him. He's older. Why not Tulsi or somebody else? I think it's because they know he has that recognition, and it's a way to just get people back in.
But just like many things, however, the Democrats also don't want to have to fucking deal with him, and that's the reason why they are doing everything they can to keep him out. The problem is that their efforts to keep him out have somewhat backfired on them. So now they're stuck in the awkward position of either having to choose to embrace him and hope that the wave that he's riding stays with them for some time, which, considering the millennials, there's a certain mistrust in the millennial generation with the Democratic Party as it is right now, may end up working against their favor unless they are able to continually field candidates like Cortez and Gabbard.
Well, speaking as somebody who attended last week's county central or Democratic Party central meeting,
Ooh.
Um,
Ooh, I want to hear this.
Generally, I am the youngest one that shows up.
Yeah. Wow, that speaks volumes.
We had a millennial show up, and he's outspoken. And my first comment was to him, "Would you mind running?"
Right.
This kid needs to run for office. The next thing is I went over my issues, and he goes, "That's what we want." Now let me put it this way. Sure, some of the millennials are dying, but the age group that they are offsetting is dying like flies. Now, the polls, when you read the polls, always go to the methods section, and you'll see that it's registered voters, 18 years old and above,
that is.
from the previous election. So that means that in the next election, that they're only talking to people that are going to be 22 years old and above on their polls. And these kids that just got offended by Dianne Feinstein are starting to get active, and they're starting to work together. Now, at our age group, our show up is less than 30%, and maybe even less than that.
Mm.
If the Hillary people don't show up and stay home, bye-bye. It's not an issue.
Right.
So
Right.
what's happening is the issues are going to be won by kids that see Aeolus. They're going to be won by the kids who are 17 to 22 now. The
My
kids that
worry
aren't
is just, my worry, I hate to say this, but I just feel like, yes, on some issues, Bernie probably will never bend. He's clearly been fighting for them for decades, but on others, okay, election integrity, you guys know I'm a broken
Here's
record
my
on
problem. Yep, there we
That's
go.
a major point, but I haven't got that far yet.
that. Okay. But I mean, there are a lot of things. Is he going to be a faux aggressive that's just there to corral people back in?
Let's talk about the
Oh,
Democrats.
come on. Let's not go there.
Yeah,
The
let's go
Democratic
there.
Party-
Let's go there. I'm with you. Yeah, let's go there.
The Democratic Party is absolutely frightened that anything they do to try to promote one of the other people now is going to backfire against them.
Mm.
When you see the local party people and you talk to our people in other counties, they're like, well, we're going to be watching this time. Kamala is not going to get an instant buy.
Yeah.
Biden is not going to get an instant buy. The parties are completely infiltrated like people by me who are former Bernies.
Mm-hmm.
I would have no problem voting for Bernie again. I'm currently supporting Andrew Yang,
Yeah.
but my overall look at it is Yang and Tulsi are about the same age.
Mm-hmm.
My preferred point right now is I still like to see Yang president, but I think we have an almost unbeatable ticket if we have Bernie president, Tulsi vice president, followed by 2024 Tulsi president.
See, I don't think they want that, and here's going to be the tell
I don't think they
of
do either.
whether
No.
if my theory is right that it's just an effort to brand to get people back in, then you watch who they're going to try to slip in as a VP.
It'll be
some
Biden. I can almost guarantee
some
it.
establishment. They'll
With
stick
Bernie?
Kamala there or something like that. That's when you know. No, this is a gimmick. This is no.
Mhm.
Right, but I mean, if the voices that I'm hearing are overwhelming to want party out. Now, Bernie is getting such a large audience already, and it's just overwhelming that it's at the point where he can basically say, if you don't like this, I can leave.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't do that before. Before he didn't have the recognition or whatever. Now, the worst thing that could happen to the Democratic Party would be.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, shoot. I lost my video.
The next person they don't want to leave is Tulsi Gabbard.
Mm.
As embarrassing as it is, they wanted a primary or whatever, but
she's
they would
already
have such extreme backlash. And you can't have that backlash in Iowa. We're the ones that are on camera first.
But she's already getting a lot of media, the same treatment, the blackout or just.
Yes, they are. Yep.
Yes. Now, that's not the only one. I spoke with a campaign manager for John Delaney also last week. And he is a billionaire. I don't agree with a lot of the stuff he has. But I tell you what, I want to see him have as fair a shot at being president as anybody else. Because his guy showed up at our thing, gave his talk. And again, this guy filed his proper paperwork. He has some good ideas, and he should be heard. And he is absolutely, completely media blackout. Mm-hmm. And he has been at all the big things that the other people have been at, and Delaney is not being talked about. And his people complain about it. And I said, if John is still in at the caucus and I'm there, I will make sure that John is not cheated. And I would say that with any of the candidates. But again, right now we're looking at the backlash. The people who are willing to knock the doors are not willing to go out and knock for any blue will do.
But until we get John's system in place, I'm afraid it's not.
that is a secondary battle we have to fight. Well, I mean, you can't only fight all battles at one in a row.
I think that's the primary one, because if that battle doesn't get won, we're screwed. We'll never get who we want elected.
Yeah.
And really, we need to have a future show on the upcoming new Iowa caucus, because they are trying to rig the Iowa caucus by using electronic voting over the internet unsecure.
Yeah, good fucking luck with that, kiddo.
Okay. I mentioned this last night. I got to talk about it again. So you guys know about the petition, right? And again, I'm not saying Tim Canova won. I'm saying some really bad stuff happened in 2016 that should have been investigated. Brenda Snipes illegally destroyed ballots. We don't know really the information from 2018 because it's all hidden and we can't check it. But so we have this petition, and it is addressed to the entire Committee on House Administration, which is largely Democrats. There are now 3 Republicans on it. H.R. 1 talks about gerrymandering and voter suppression, which are both very important, but nothing about the voting machines, nothing about the electronic voting machines. And I kind of hoped, maybe the Republicans will pay attention just because they're on the other side and they may do it. The Democrats are going to ignore something that is about Debbie Wasserman Schultz, right? And so I thought, well, maybe, but we've heard nothing. And then I found this Conservative Action Project where they talk about, they oppose H.R. 1. They call it the ultimate fantasy of the left. I'm like, oh, great. Maybe they're going to talk about the machines. Nope.
No, of course
not at all. So neither side. So I mentioned this last night and I haven't done it yet. I got to dig in and try to find out more about the voting machine, Dominion and ES&S. Who are they donating to? What kind of corruption might there be there? In the movie Hacking Democracy, they discovered, I think it was Dominion voting system was giving money to the Republican Party in Florida, I think.
Yeah.
So what is going on there? And this is not okay to be going on behind closed doors with the voting machine vendors, meeting with DHS, and these efforts supposedly for all this election reform and election integrity, and doesn't say a damn thing about any of that. I don't even get it. It's why bother? You can get all the people in there to vote, and if someone can just go in and do like Benny Smith explains with the fraction magic, and and then ballots get destroyed, and Brenda Snipes, she had no business being in that office 2 years later. So
no, she didn't.
Tim raised a question, and there was an article in Disobedient Media about why was that not taken, up the chain of command to investigate further when Brenda Snipes was, when they determined that was illegal, that she destroyed the ballots, and something like, I don't remember the guy's name in Florida, but that it should have been brought further up to the Department of Justice. So, I mean, there's if nothing's going to be done about this stuff, what is the point? I mean, we can all go and vote, but if there's no accountability, no transparency, what are we doing?
Yep, totally agree.
Yeah, like I said, we need to be fighting multiple battles at the same time.
Yeah, we do.
And as we define them, we know what resources to allocate. Again, I would turn to the same group. Nothing influences a 17-year-old boy more than his 16-year-old girlfriend.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay.
We need, I might sound Albert, but am I wrong? So the thing is, we need to be focusing while
technically she was a month older than I was.
Well, that happens sometimes. That happens sometimes. And sometimes it's their 16-year-old boyfriend or whatever.
Very nice, Aola.
Wait, what did I miss?
But again, we need to not say we're cutting off our approach to the 18-year-olds. We need to go down to the people that they're associating with, because they can still hold signs, they can still rally, and they can still influence their friends who do vote. They can even talk to their friends that are on the border of voting or not to get out and go vote. So it's very important that we be sure to include everybody. These aren't being included. Now, this is also, we saw these kids, 12 years old, 13 years old, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, go in and talk to Dianne Feinstein. Who else, what else should they be talking about? When we tell them, you guys can't live until you fix the voting system, we need to get these kids not only out there saying we need to have this climate action, but to get the climate action, you need to get the corruption out of the government. Right. So we need to say to the kids, get out there and this is the issue you want to get done if you want to live.
Right. And to this, it's been really hard for me because I am not an IT person. And to have to try to understand these voting machines and the whole, I mean, I've gotten a lot better at it, but it is dry and, to people that don't understand it, you just kind of tune out. But I just keep coming back to it because we can't change anything if we don't fix that.
Or at the very least, we can't do it with any guaranteed reliability. Right. There's always it would have to be what it essentially boils down to is essentially hoping that the Democratic infrastructure or whatever party infrastructure essentially doesn't fuck up, or correction, that they do fuck up and make a mistake that allows us to get through. I mean, that couldn't happen. I'm not saying that. I mean, come on. The Democrats were also so sure that they would win the election. They piggybacked Donald Trump to the top of the Republican ticket. Look how well that turned out for them. Right. So the idea that the Democrats aren't arrogant enough to essentially engineer their own downfall again and put Sanders and his people in office by accident isn't out of the realm of possibility. But is it something that we want to ride solely on? That, I would agree, is not a smart idea.
Here's my problem with that narrative there, Aeolus, is that you're missing something, and that is that they were far more afraid of Bernie than they were of Trump.
Oh no, I'm not denying that.
And so they would only have cheated Bernie in such a way that they could ensure that Hillary was going to win. When it came to Trump, they weren't as worried simply because Trump didn't scare them as badly.
He really should have.
They really were not as afraid of Trump as they were of Bernie. Now there are two reasons for that. One, they really didn't think the guy had a shot. I don't think he even thought he had a shot at winning. And part two of that is that his policy for policy, he really wasn't that far from Hillary anyway.
Get a load of this.
When you take into account her record, for sure.
Yes.
This just came in my email of the election integrity group. but it's an article that's out. Who is this guy? Ralph Lopez. I'm going to read. It's not very long. Listen to the title of this. Will Bernie Sanders waste his supporters' money again by not really wanting to win? Okay, let's get one thing straight.
I highly doubt it's going to be a case of not wanting to win this time.
Okay.
But will he under the real question I would think, and this is just from hearing that headline, the issue is not going to be whether or not Bernie Sanders doesn't want to win. The issue is going to be whether or not Bernie Sanders is properly estimating the reach of the establishment he's trying to overthrow.
If he is. Well, okay, I just scanned this, and I'm gonna bet that there are things in this article that some of us know and some don't. And the ones of us that know are the ones that are more.
I just realized I had two other candidates that I was going to talk about that we completely got sidetracked from.
That happens. Do you mind if I read some, or at least part of this, and then we can come back?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's get one thing straight. Bernie Sanders was my kind of candidate. But if he had really wanted to win in 2016, he would have challenged the primary election results 10 ways to Sunday. In Massachusetts, Bill Clinton illegally campaigned inside the polling wire, glad-handling and backslapping as Secretary of State William J. Galvin looked the other way, merely issuing a reminder later to everyone that electioneering inside the wire was illegal. Later in Massachusetts, it was discovered that Sanders had won. No, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this. Pardon me. I don't normally do this. I'm going to do this on the air. Al Suarez, nice to hear from you.
I'm on the air?
You're on the air.
What's going on?
Okay.
What is wrong with this guy?
Listen, you're like harassing me, and I'm not going to have it anymore. You sent me
so
many.
I'm on the air so you can make false accusations.
No, you want me to share the messages? Listen, I had a good interview with you.
All the message is saying is, hey,
Listen,
what's up?
hey.
But I'll go.
No, listen. You need to just stop doing that. You messaged me so many times. My sister was here to have treatment for cancer at Duke. And I didn't answer you, and you bombarded me with messages. So just back off a little bit. You know, I'm not going to, this is an open forum. We welcome anybody to come on, but doing that is not a good tactic.
I'll make better, and I'm sorry if that's
Thank
the case.
you. Why don't you chill out and come on another time?
Yeah.
Okay. That'll be good. Talk to you later. Okay. Bye-bye. Anyway.
So that happened.
Anyway, where was I? Okay. All right. Later in Massachusetts, it was discovered that Sanders had won by an average of 18% in towns where the paper ballots are counted by hand, but lost by about 1.4% in towns where the ballots were counted by machine. Interesting. Sanders supporters filed a lawsuit demanding to look at the paper ballots, but a Massachusetts court struck it down on procedural grounds. In California, election officials in San Diego got caught red-handed using whiteout. Yes, whiteout. I remember that video. On Sanders' votes. It doesn't matter what the department gave for a reason. There should never be whiteout in a vote counting room. Never, not once. And in Arizona, thousands of voters waited in the hot sun and into the night to vote. In Maricopa County, the state's most populous county, and many quit because they had to go back to work or mind kids, or elderly sitting in chairs, right? Maricopa County is where Phoenix is. All of this is summarized in, and here's a link. Yes, Hillary did steal the Democratic primary in 2016. I'll have to look at that one.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm glad Bernie entered the race. But why run if you don't have the belly fire for the big fight when it starts? Bernie certainly had it early in his career when he got dragged off by cops as he sat next to a black woman demonstrating for her civil rights. In those days, Bernie was really with her when someone needed to be. But what about now? Bernie managed to say some of these episodes of cheating were disgraceful, but that isn't enough when the $27 you just gave him was the last you had that didn't go to bills or food. Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing Bernie delegates in the bathroom crying in Philly. People just gave everything. Anyway.
Yep.
But why is that author blaming Bernie? Why don't they not blame the DNC? The
Well,
DNC.
I think he does. Let me get. I think he's saying like to do it again now is okay. Announcing that you have observers and legal teams on standby and ready to rock is all well and good, but what good are observers if they never do anything with their observations?
Good point.
Hardball politics means going to court in a heartbeat. Hold up. Do not pass go. Just what the hell is going on here, Your Honor? Bernie had every grounds to ask a Massachusetts judge to invalidate the precincts where old Bill illegally crossed the polling wire 150 feet from the entrance of the polling station in Massachusetts. He had every grounds to ask a New York judge to hold the primary all over again in Brooklyn, where at least 125,000 voters inexplicably got wiped off the rolls or had their registrations fucked with. Now, when I went to Unrig in New Orleans, I talked to several different election integrity groups. They knew nothing about that. They didn't even know. How could they not know? Old Bernie owes his supporters an explanation. It is not academic. The very same people running the DNC primary election apparatus in 2016 will be running it in 2020. There's absolutely no reason to believe they will behave any better. In fact, there is every reason to believe they will behave as badly or worse. In the intervening years, election departments have hidden whatever can be hidden and a lot of things that shouldn't be by law. In Florida in 2017, Broward County election supervisor Brenda Snipes flat out burned, destroyed illegally every last paper ballot affecting a non-democratic establishment primary candidate, Tim Canova. Canova was suing to have his votes counted again after statisticians spotted some mighty peculiar vote patterns in the voting data, which suggested machine total tampering. Now Canova can never prove election fraud one way or the other, which itself is evidence screaming of guilt for rigging the election for the establishment candidate, Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Florida State Judge Rag Singhal of the 17th Judicial Circuit Court held that Wasserman Schultz, ally Brenda Snipes, they campaigned together. That was the picture I put on the petition. Illegally destroyed ballots, which are required by federal law to be preserved for 22 months after an election. And the judge also said the defendant's lack of intent to destroy evidence while this case was pending is irrelevant. Okay, let me just go on. Okay, in Ohio. Okay, wait, hang on. There's no question of the fact that Snipes had engaged in a violation of federal statute 52, blah, blah, blah. Punishable by up to a year in jail. Yet nothing happened. She didn't even get fired. In Cuyahoga County, Ohio, an election department attorney responded to my request for the ballot images, digital images that are automatically taken of each ballot as it is run through the optical scan counting machine with stonewalling and prevarication. An Ohio judge clearly ruled that the ballot images were public record and therefore subject to Freedom of Information Act requests. The attitude of the county election department is, who cares? Sanders must come clean and come clean fast. People work too hard for their money for him to be thinking he will just influence the dialogue and not fight to win. One way for Bernie to start coming clean is to immediately announce his support for nationwide legislation requiring the option of voter hand-marked paper ballots, either hand-counted or counted by a modern optical scan vote counting machine, which takes digital images of the paper ballots. The digital images should post publicly for recounting as citizen election experts recommend. Another way for Bernie to come clean would be to join the call by Tim Canova, the petition, for law enforcement to enforce the law in the matter of former Broward County election supervisor Brenda Snipes, who was fired by the governor before she could end her term in peace. Finally, they fire her when it becomes a big two-battle, red and blue establishment candidate.
Ridiculous.
Right? Let's see. Where was I? Whoops. Snipes now has the gall to contest her firing on the grounds that she is being singled out because she is black, although no one can show that illegally burning ballots is a standard practice even in Florida. And I believe she has some big retirement package too. She has some big. Bernie Sanders has become the Bernie who told his supporters he wanted him to clog the courts with righteous lawsuits and demanding revotes and recounts wherever warranted. Brothers and sisters, this is the real world. We know that, Bernie, and the real world sometimes demands a fight. What Tim Canova is doing, that's what a fight looks like. It is not a question which pertains only to primaries. In the 2016 general, votesleuth.org discovered a strange and highly unlikely redshift pattern indicating possible election fraud in favor of Donald Trump, though Ohio's 18 electoral votes would not have reversed the outcome. We want the old Bernie back. We want the Bernie who got dragged off by the cops when he stood by a black woman. That's it. Thank you, Ralph Lopez. He's been there's only been a couple. I've been worried I'm going to get booted off of this thread because of some of the things I say. But there have only been a couple that have been bold enough to say these things. But I'm sorry, this is not a red and blue issue. This is...
No,
it's not.
And that's all. There's nothing untrue in that. All that. Why is Brenda Snipes? She should be prosecuted, and it's not just her. Who else was involved in it?
Yeah.
She claims that she just signed folders, and someone brought it to her. So they need to investigate, and she shouldn't have some big pension.
No.
Ridiculous. Anyway, thank you for letting me read that. That's just...
No,
That's
good.
how I feel. I mean, and that's why I'm suspicious of Bernie, because I think that he would do a lot of things that he's fought for decades, but within the system, without fighting these things, this corruption, I don't see how it really...
Nothing's going to change. The real problem I have is that prior to the convention, Bernie made several announcements to the effect that he was going to fight this thing tooth and nail to the end, that he was not going to give up. He was not going to let them cheat him. He said he had seen the funny business taking place, and he wasn't going to stand idly by and let his supporters be cheated.
Well,
he did exactly that.
There was the bit, remember him, I remember, he said something about he didn't want to be a Ralph Nader. That was early.
Well, he said that after the fact. Hey, everybody.
Hi, Greg.
Now that you mention it, Brian, I feel like I remember him. I got the impression too from certain things that he said back then that he was really going to take the fight to the convention, but he obviously didn't do that at all.
He didn't do that.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know.
And if he's not going to stand up for election integrity now, I can't in good conscience support him. I can't.
I understand. Yeah, I hear you.
I certainly, my thing with it is that I can understand to it. Maybe this is the side of me that's less. I think I've mentioned before that I don't like lending myself to conspiracy theories until every other reasonable shadow of a doubt can be expunged. And I still find Bernie's actions, at least within that credible, plausible doubt. For myself, at least. For myself. You don't have to agree with me on this one. Because the way I read the situation was when Bernie may or may not have had the intention of taking that fight to the convention. What I think ultimately stopped it was Trump, essentially. He had made it clear very early on that he was more. I thought it was fairly early on, like midway through through the election, he would prioritize taking Trump out of off of his path from the White House before he would take his path for victory. And I think he very well could have fought. I think he could have fought at the convention, but with the potential damage that would have done to the Democratic Party, well, just to the left's one apparatus of motion in general at that juncture in time. I think he probably thought was way too high of a risk. Yeah, you'd win the fight, but at what cost? You'd basically have alienated every one of Hillary's supporters. At which point, you might as well have just keeled over at the convention.
Hey, do you mind if I interrupt you a second? I apologize. And the only reason I'm going to mention anything else about this is because I have something to say about the person that just called that I answered the phone for that's been like bothering me for 4 weeks. I had a great interview with him. It was fine, but he just wouldn't let up and was posting on my timeline, stuff like that. And he just sent a message saying that you sounded more like Gloria Steinem than Kelly Lane tonight. I have no idea what that means. All I'll say about Gloria Steinem is I remember her on Bill Maher making that asinine comment about that women were just supporting Bernie because they were going where the boys were, or some awful comment. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not Gloria Steinem.
He destroyed her reputation with that. Just destroyed it.
Yeah. All right. So, no, I am no Gloria Steinem. Hi, Rich.
Oh, hello.
Hey, Rich.
All right.
Go ahead, Aolis. I'm sorry. I had to just say that. But I'm not responding to anything else. Al, chill out, please. Thank you. All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
So that's Bernie out of the way. Now we get to move on to number 2, and I do have a rant that's associated with this coming up, but I'm going to stay it in order to make some cases for this next person, and that person is Tulsi Gabbard. Now, of all the people on the field that I've seen thus far, I initially swung with Snork on Ye, but after watching Tulsi for some months now, I am slowly finding myself drifting closer and closer to her camp. I'm not at the point that I'm saying that I'm ready to officially endorse or anything like that. Not that I even have a platform to make that endorsement worth more than Confederate paper money. But Tulsi has impressed me in a lot of in both her discipline, her sense of calm in the face of adverse pressure. And to be honest, she has been grilled like there has been no tomorrow. And almost every media appearance that she has made since her announcement, and not once have I seen her crack. Not once have I seen her lose her temper. Not once have I seen her face falter. And that's...
Well, I mean, she's
seen It reminds me a lot of the tales I used to hear of my own grandfather. And my grandfather was had the kind of temperament because he grew up in World War II era Japan. In fact, he nearly, after his graduation from Kitano, he was nearly recruited into the kamikaze squadrons to raise defense. The war had thankfully ended before he was put on one of those crafts. But after the war, when he was working at NHK, my mom used to speak of him possessing that very similar kind of demeanor. And honestly, I think Tulsi's stance on interventionism, as well as her associated shared stances with Sanders on a great multitude of issues, I think has won me over. Now, I do think that Tulsi has more baggage than Sanders does.
How so?
part of it is due to her stance, reversal of stance on the LGBT issues around 2012, which is around the same time Hillary had her transition. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a cynical ploy. It could very well be that just, that's the time. That's the time that for one reason or another, it eventually led her to change her views.
But don't you feel like, I feel that she's believable when she says that. I mean,
No. I'm not saying
Hillary
that she is.
just, I don't buy it. It's like.
No.
Yeah, Hillary's a political opportunity. I don't buy it.
The way I see it, though, people are going to bring back Hillary to some of her supporters because, let's face it, a lot of Tulsi supporters were former Bernie supporters. And so there's going to be a lot of, well, you were upset when Hillary did it. Why are you suddenly okay with Gabbard?
Because Gabbard's believable. Hillary is just a political animal.
But you're right.
Completely different things.
Sorry. But you're right. They're going to try that. Like, remember when Tulsi, I forget what it was about exactly, but she actually went and met with Trump. It was some kind of foreign, I don't remember what it was about, but they, just hammered her on that.
She was meeting with Trump to discuss basically strategy for Syria.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
Essentially to advocate for being reasonable and thinking clearly, basically.
Right. And I think she's a fantastic candidate. And there's another reason right there. She's a veteran and she can talk to that segment. But that is also something they're going to try to use against her to make her kind of seem like she's right wing or whatever. That she even talked to Trump is bad.
The other thing that I have to be honest, I can't skirt around this. Her issue on her stance on torture, at least the ones that she has as she has commented on previously, are problematic. Now, I'm not suggesting she's some kind of Dick Cheney figure. No, but she does seem to succumb to this sort of Jack Bauer mentality that of posing the hypothetical of violating one person's civil rights is worth the price to save potentially thousands of civilian lives, which while meaning leaves open a very slippery moral slope that I don't think even she's fully comprehending could lead us down, which is part of the reason why we ended up in the mess in Iraq in the first place. Now, with that said, all those set aside, I still think that she, of all the candidates on the field, she provides the most stability in terms of her leadership capability, in terms of her ability to conduct herself in front of others in a professional manner.
My daughter calls her the real life superwoman.
Yeah.
You know about her election integrity,
Superwoman.
right? She is a champion of election integrity, of paper ballots, open source, international design.
Yeah,
there's
I've
that
heard
too. So
I've heard that. The only thing is, I was a little disappointed when I first heard about that. I forget where she was, and she instantly said something about Russia. So that just
did she really?
So what she said about that, I did hear those comments. What she was saying is that yes, Russia likely had interfered in the election, but here's the caveat: we do that as well. Everybody is doing that to one another in order to buy the most politically advantageous position for their state as possible.
Constantly.
That is just what happens.
Right.
The conversation needs it shouldn't be what do we do? How do we get the Russians back? The question is, how do we secure our elections so that the Russians don't even have the opportunity to meddle in it?
Okay,
that's the question that needed to be addressed. And unfortunately, that was the one that that nobody was willing to answer.
Yeah, because the two-party system, like nobody really wants to actually address cybersecurity, because then Republicans and Democrats in leadership positions with power in DC, they can't really fuck with elections if we actually have legitimate elections.
Right.
So they'd rather just keep it the way it is.
That's why there's nothing on this committee on either side.
Just bitch about Russia all the time without any actual ideas for anything.
But we all have to stop with this, the Russians. I am so fed up with that.
Right.
I'll hold on. I'll be right back.
Go ahead. But, we say that. I've brought this up several times. Like when we say, the media is doing it all the time. But if we were going around saying the Chinese, the Mexicans, that Russia's a big country, and you hear it all the time.
The Jews, the Muslims, the black.
I think
say the Russian government or the Russian whatever, but not the Russians. I mean,
no.
How's that okay?
I don't even think she used the term the Russians. Thankfully,
right.
I think she just used Russia in order to refer to the state of Russia, the Russian state, not the Russian people. So there is a bit of a distinction in that. Although that also relies a lot on people's ability to read nuance and syntax, which I think has been proven recently by the whole debacle about Tulsi is not a real interventionist fiasco that's been boiling on Twitter. It might be symbolized that people understand very little about how to read context.
Well, yes, we know that.
Are we in agreement, though, that there were Russian actors that have been documented infiltration and maintaining access into state registration systems and
I trust.
Well, sure. I don't think that's necessarily. I don't think that's unbelievable unbelievable, and certainly there have been documented cases of it happening before. But
Grizzly's report was very clear in the manners, the mechanisms, and the fragments that are left behind in these things, especially C-hack.
Okay, we can get into that because I've been wanting to ask you about this, and John, I have I have utmost respect for all of your knowledge. I've been a big skeptic because I feel like the intelligence community is not telling us. They're expecting us to just believe this without any evidence. I really trust your judgment, huh?
They are. Right. They can't reveal their ways and means necessarily, but they did release enough. Sure, all the IP addresses that were released were Tor exit points, right? That's without saying. They did release the fragments that are left behind after the infiltrations. Some complaints, the article that you forwarded me that I read, was that they're not providing enough.
Was that the Cyber Scoop one?
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
And that was interesting, and it is true that by showing the artifacts that are left behind, it's kind of like you've already been compromised, and here's the evidence. Grizzly Steep only talked about 2 actors, and they're known, and it didn't demonstrate those known. It basically said that we've monitored these people before, and this is how we know that they're tied to Russian military intelligence.
But that's Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, 28 and 29, I think.
29.
Yeah, but these were just 2. This is going on all the time, and it isn't. But at any rate, they were very explicit about the state registration systems that and compromised, infiltrated. They were very clear about how a lot of the phishing took place, how they used the short codes and URLs to trick, like Podesta, perhaps, revealing his information. So, and they had very well documented the evidence left behind that proved, or at least they were saying this is what proves it's this bad actor or that. And one of the things I was kind of disappointed in was the list of hacker names or however you want to refer to them that they provided. That was kind of odd. But I thought the evidence and the fragments and some of the information that was provided in Grizzly Steep was very good.
Well, I mean, I think where I am on this, as much as I can possibly understand it as a not expert like you are, is, as you've said, and as people even on the opposite of that, the VIPS group, Ray McGovern and Benny and all, the people that didn't agree with their assessment that it wasn't a Russian hack, that it was a leak, everyone is pretty much saying there's just not enough evidence to say one way or the other for certain. So I guess that's where I am on it. I did listen a lot to Benny and McGovern, and to me, and to a lot of us, it just seemed like, wow, this is a convenient way to just blame all this, on the Russians. But
no, I have to agree with you there. It did go a little too far that the Russians now are behind everything. I mean, these are and very targeted fishing expeditions.
And you couple that with other things. This might seem off topic, but I brought it up earlier. And there's this great article by John Kiriakou, who's NSA or CIA? I can't remember. NSA, I think. Talking about McCabe and what actually happened. I mean, this is completely blackout in most of the media. You have to watch like Judicial Watch and read Breitbart and stuff to get any of this information. Or Consortium News. I highly recommend that. Here, actually, let me pull this up. I hate to just sit here and read articles, but I'm gonna share this because I think. Oh, Greg, you're still on, right? This was that one I showed you when you were here.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I forget because you're not on camera. Sorry.
I do somewhat disagree though with the VIPs.
Right. Okay. By all means, I think you've explained it, but do you want to say that again, or?
Well, their analysis was they were looking at Guccifer 2's repository that he made public, and they were doing an analysis of the deltas of times between files.
Right.
And there was due to these the length of time, it couldn't have been a movement off of the server directly to wherever this repository was, but that it looked like, and they claimed a leak because it had the, I think it was close to FireWire speeds or USB 3.
Right.
So they thought, oh, this was a USB. But that's making a lot of assumptions. One, it's making the assumption that the movement from a computer, we don't know if it was the source computer or perhaps the station that was used to hack in to a USB, because it's beyond really the realm of possibility that Guccifer 2's public domain repository was actually the landing place. As much as it could have been a hack and a slow leak over an internet, and an insider putting a USB into it. But the same signatures, those time deltas between the files, there was a hack, and he moved the data, trickled it out of the machine to his source machine, where he's doing his hacking from, and then put a USB stick into that and moved all the files off his hacking machine onto it. It would have the same signatures as if you put a USB into the target machine and moved all the files off.
Okay.
It's not conclusive enough to be saying one way or the other. It was a hack or a hack, it was a leak or it wasn't a leak. If you're an odd guy, it would be a leak, right? Because hacking is not like it used to be, right? You don't buffer overflow. You don't. It's pretty easy to protect a machine, although it is the World Wide Web, and that's why everything's targeted phishing, right? And they're basically doing social engineering to gain access. That's the style of hacking that takes place today. It's not like shell shock, right, where there's a back door into the kernel or something like that, like the old days. So that's just my I'm just saying, I like the analysis of the VIPS people, but it's not conclusive either way.
Well, and it's important to bring that up, and that's been, I've expressed what, I know I have a bias, and it's because of the whole picture. But I'm willing to accept that that's, that is, we can't possibly have a concrete answer on that. Hello again. But it's like when you couple it with, you've got Hillary out there saying Russian WikiLeaks. Okay, there's no evidence whatsoever that WikiLeaks is tied to any of that, even if there was.
It doesn't matter.
Secondly,
it's on
Russia
her side.
has its own WikiLeaks platform.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
What did you say?
Sorry, I was making a joke.
Okay.
Saying,
Russia
Russia
has
has their own
very own WikiLeaks platform.
Right. Well, that was Hillary said.
Oh, suka.
What do they call that? I listened to this podcast. You are not so smart, but it's where you. It's a term for when you put two words together like that to just make an association. Russian.
Russia?
She just started going Russian WikiLeaks. Like it's not it's Australia.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the nature of propaganda. You repeat something with bullshit enough times, and eventually it's obviously true.
But I don't have the answers. I'm not an IT expert. All I can do is, rely on people like you, John, and others. And I contacted directly one of the people that was, had initially agreed with the VIPS group and then dissented. And she said it was not conclusive. And I accept that. It's not conclusive. I don't go around saying it's a leak. I have my own bias in what I believe, but I think it's also possible, as you said, that and the reason why a lot of us don't believe it is because this was all kept from the public. So then to just come out and be like, well, yeah, Russia did all this. I mean, for those of us that are younger and don't remember hiding under our desks for, bomb threats, and we just vaguely have this memory of the Cold War in the 80s, it sounds just outlandish. Remember when I played that clip of Obama saying to Romney, the 80s called and wants its foreign policy back? I mean, that's how we see it. Like, where this came out of nowhere, and it's just something for Hillary Clinton to blame anything but herself. A foreign country, Susan Sarandon, you name it, anything. And
well, that's what she should have banged, is she should have blamed Podesta. I mean, as a password,
well,
right?
A lot of
but
people.
Then let's go one further. What if leaking that out was part of a stage in of itself?
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many possibilities.
Right.
So dumb, the whole thing.
Yeah, so there's no point in getting stuck on one. But I want to mention this. I'm not going to read this whole article, but if anybody hasn't heard about this, I highly recommend Consortium News. A lot of whistleblowers. John Kiriakou, I think everybody knows who he is. And here, has anyone seen about McCabe? Anybody watch this 60 Minutes interview? Rich?
Yes, I've seen him. I've seen him on several shows. I like the guy. I like what he's saying. I think he has a good perspective on what happened.
Okay.
What was happening?
What is your perspective on that?
Well, I was a special agent in Army intelligence.
Right, I remember.
And I think that what he talks about sounds real. It sounds, they're talking about, was Article 25, is that what it was? Where he said they could.
Using the Constitution.
That's something they're talking about here. They're talking about a coup.
Mm-hmm.
If Article 25 was invoked and had 2/3 of the people on the cabinet wanted to take Trump out of office, that wouldn't be a coup. That would be invoking an article in the Constitution that is there to be used when you have an ineffective or a president who cannot function.
Okay, but what about Rod Rosenstein?
That would not be a coup, in my opinion.
What about him wearing a wire? Is that something that is? What do you know about that? As far as
I mean, that's something that if you want to verify what the president is saying or what is actually going on his ability to actually be the president, wearing a wire and having it on record, the kind of thing he's doing, like he was asking the former president, the former FBI director, to take it easy on whoever it was, to not investigate, not investigation. It's, that kind of thing is obstruction of justice by the president.
But didn't somebody correct me if I'm wrong here? But my understanding is that the Steele dossier is what and this is from Bill Binney and other places that I read, that the Steele dossier is what they took to the FISA court that allowed them to get the wiretap. Is that right? Anybody know differently?
That was the
wiretap
official story, anyway.
Okay.
There was no wiretap, right? From by McCabe or by the Justice Department.
Hang on, let me double check I'm forgetting my details now.
I believe that was the official story. Was just that they acquired access to the Steele dossier.
If you watch Bill Binney,
the associated analysis of it, provided by the Clinton campaign, and used that as the basis for.
Okay, this is from Breitbart. I don't care. I'll read Breitbart. I check my sources. I read multiple places, but Comey admits Steele dossier unverified for months after FISA warrant granted. And that was the Steele dossier. So,
does this article from Breitbart have a further primary source?
I'm sure. Hang on. It's in but you can look it up. I mean, Bill Binney talks about it. Let's see, PolitiFact. Let's see. I think PolitiFact is the greatest, but let's see.
Is McCabe connected to that some way?
I don't remember exactly. I should know this. I'm looking.
See the connection there.
I'm thinking the wiretap, right? Doesn't that have to do with?
Well, wiretap's a common thing. It's a common device for
hang on.
Wearing a wire.
Okay.
You infiltrate the mafia or whatever.
I think though it was the wiretap from the FISA warrants, and they're basically saying that the Steele dossier was the motivation or the motivator to obtain the FISA warrants, which gave way to the wiretap.
Okay, but
not the wire that was suggested being worn.
Not this wiretap. Okay, different. Different.
Yeah, that's a common investigative device for obtaining evidence against some object of investigation.
Different
it's an evidence gathering device.
Different instance.
It's a very common device, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
But you can look at these situations and see they're politically motivated. Imagine. We're on the left. Imagine this is Trump on the other side. We can't ignore that this all seems politically motivated.
I hear that the Steele dossier allowed them to obtain a warrant, and I'm like, how is that even possible? If I'm not mistaken, wasn't that something that they paid off?
Yes,
they paid British intelligence for it or something.
British intelligence officer Christopher Steele.
Right, and wasn't that also where the fucking rumor about a P-tape came from?
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
So how did they even get a warrant off of something so ridiculous?
And it was done by Fusion GPS, hired on behalf of Clinton's campaign. That's when the firm hired Steele. So. Yeah.
Just sounds like a non-starter to me. But I don't know, whatever.
So, Trump himself has blamed the dossier for launching the FBI probe into his campaign.
Because it did.
Right. So that it's all related.
Yeah, but we don't know the FISA warrants. Just playing the devil's advocate here, we don't know what else was provided to obtain those warrants.
Okay.
That's a fair
sure.
point, but that isn't also. But if they do exist, they aren't necessarily on public record either. So we don't really have a definitive place
But what we have heard is that it was all, there's no evidence for any of the stuff that was in it. That's what
Well, now in hindsight, we know that the Steele report has been discredited. At the time, though, I don't think they had all the information to fully discredit it. Perhaps.
I think, well, any of us that heard it was funded by the Clinton campaign, we didn't believe it. I mean, I'm just saying.
Well, maybe it's not fair to say that we knew, but but we had I think it's fair to say we had an inkling that this was probably full of shit.
Yeah.
If the Steele dossier is found to have been invalid, and it was the reason, it was the reason for the other investigations, is there any prosecution for filing a false investigation?
I think you get a retirement package like Brenda Snipes. And you just...
No, because that's their job is to investigate. We still have a special counsel that's still investigating, all because of everything, the FISA, everything. So,
that's what happens. If you're a high-level power broker and you get in major trouble and commit all kinds of felonies, you get shamed all the way to the
The whole thing, according to what McCabe said, the firing of Comey is what caused the special counsel to be appointed in the first place. To even have the investigation, he said that because of Comey being fired and Donald Trump's behavior made them suspicious. His support of the Russians and of the dictator, which is named Putin.
But all he did was make stupid comments.
Think that he might have been actually an agent or an unwitting agent of the Russian government.
I just don't buy it.
That's the reason they started the investigation of him. You know,
his popping off like, why don't you look? You know, when he talked to WikiLeaks or get Russia to check. That's no different than all the other stupid crap that comes out of his mouth. And they went, he said it. Now we can, And they just went, he said it. Now we can use it against him. But it was just his usual just verbal diarrhea, if you ask me.
Yep. Well, that's true. But I mean, but the Trump, his verbal diarrhea has always been in favor of Putin. He's not in favor of our own intelligence services. I find that offensive as a former special agent in Army intelligence that he does not even pay attention to the.
I hear what you're saying.
Billions of dollars for the intelligence to be developed by we have a very extensive intelligence service, and he doesn't even pay attention to it. He wants to trust Putin instead of our intelligence service.
But
I find that.
Why do people?
I hear what you're saying. I mean, you've worked in it, so I hear you, and that's.
Why is everybody only sweating over him? Like talking nice about Russia. I mean, the guy just loves authoritarians. Like, why don't nobody complains about Israel or Saudi in any serious way? Like, especially not in the media. It's just all Russia. They don't complain about how much he loves Israel, and it's just business as usual. They don't complain about Saudi. They don't complain that he like praises a psychopath like mass murderer who's the president of the Philippines. Nobody mentions things.
Okay, well, one thing is the whether or not North Korea has nuclear weapons, whether or not they are doing anything about what their activities are. Our intelligence service can handle what is going on there. He says they told him that he has not been, that he has been doing things, that North Korea has been developing programs. They haven't done much to pull back their nuclear program. And Putin told him that yes, they have. They quit. There's not any missiles there, and he believed Putin rather than our intelligence service. Now that's a big deal.
Well,
yeah, I remember that.
He's going in 2 weeks. He's going to go into a negotiation with North Korea about what's happening, and he's relying on Putin rather than our intelligence service to tell him what the real situation is with North Korea.
Well, okay,
I'm inclined not to trust either personally.
I hear you, Rich.
Yeah.
I hear you, Rich, and I respect. I mean, again, most respect for you. You worked in. I mean, but when you look at what's happened currently.
Yeah, I knew, man. I was stationed in South Korea, not North Korea. I was stationed in South Korea, and there was a man had been stationed in Japan and had been stationed in Hawaii undercover, like a Philby kind of situation. I led 3 lives kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And he came in at the train station. I accidentally called him by his cover name, and he just turned white. This guy had been undercover for about the last 15 years. His family lived in Hawaii. He said there was two people in the world that knew what his name was, and it was him. It was himself and his handler. And man, he almost had a heart attack right there when I said the name, you know.
Wow.
But this is a man. He had lost 1/3 of his stomach from ulcers from having been undercover. This was a man who was a true patriot. He was somebody that worked for our country. He's an intelligence man, agent, who was a true patriot, who was doing things for our country so that we knew who our enemies were and what they were doing. I mean, but we have people all over the world in this. I trust them.
Right.
I trust that man. He was a good man, you know, because he really was a true patriot. He was doing for our country.
I think it's great.
It's really,
and the intelligence service is full of people that anybody in this conversation, if you knew those people, you would realize that they were really on the side of the United States government. They are to be trusted. That they are really they have a lot of integrity.
I'm sure. Yes, absolutely, a lot of integrity, and I think most of us, even when we're critical, most of us probably find that when we know these types of people in real life, because I've known people who are former spec ops and all that type of stuff, and the vast majority of the time they seem fantastic, and I'm glad that they have served and all that. They seem like great people who really are always in it for the right reasons, almost always.
But do you think
and they have integrity? But for me, it's a more of a systemic thing.
Rich. I mean, do you? Sorry, Greg. I didn't mean to do it.
Anyway, I'm gonna just.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I just want to.
The FBI, CIA, those people, they are not political. They are not.
But I think we're in a different.
Most of them are patriotic people who are trying to serve their country, and they don't give a damn about Democrats, Republicans, and the president. The whole damn spirit. Therefore,
individuals, but then
maybe not the figureheads.
The greater structure itself.
The figureheads. I mean, so what do you think of this article from John Kiriakou? And he talks about, the deep state and the CIA, and that we do have this unelected. I mean, maybe things are. I mean, I respect what you're saying, Rich, and I'm sure you're right. But maybe things are different now, and it has become political, and it's become. Where these people are not a neutral, they're an unelected, body of people that, because right now we just have had, Democrats in office. It happens to be leaning that way. I mean, is that not possible?
I was in back there. Martin Luther King was on in March back in 1968 when I was special agent in Army Intelligence, and the Army Intelligence, we were following him to see what his activity was.
Right. COINTELPRO. What do you know about that? What do you know about that?
So we were part of that. I mean, I was,
Wow. Talk about that.
And I didn't agree with it. I didn't agree with us. In fact, I didn't know who Martin Luther King was at that time. I really didn't,
Wow. Well, can you tell us anything? That's fascinating. So you knew about COINTELPRO, and what do you remember from that time period? Or can you talk about it?
They were just watching. They were just they thought he was somewhat subversive because he was maybe undermining whatever, But just in case he was, I mean, they investigated a lot of people without the way that he talked about doing anything adverse to harm him, or harm what he was trying to do, or anything like that.
Have you heard about this? Kiriakou.
Socialist.
Kiriakou mentions it right here. It's in the article and I've heard this.
I'm looking at the paragraph right now. Even worse, the same organizations, FBI and CIA, are the ones that have sought to undermine our democracy over the years. Now, I don't.
No, that they.
I don't know more about that. I don't know if that's true or not.
Have you ever heard this? That COINTELPRO tried to convince him to commit suicide. I think they held affairs over his head and things like that. Have you ever heard any of that with MLK?
I don't think I didn't know any intelligence people that had that kind of information. I'm sure they had the information. They probably knew everybody that Martin Luther King ever slept with, and he did know a lot of that, actually, So.
Let's see. McCabe's almost offhanded comments on 60 Minutes that the FBI actively considered deposing a sitting president should be cause for alarm. Set partisan politics aside for a moment. We're talking about deposing a sitting president. And to me, I think that right there is far scarier than a Trump presidency. I've said this all along.
Well, that's the Article 25 thing. That's all they were doing is saying if their investigation indicated that President Trump was acting against the interests of the United States.
Okay.
And from what I can tell, he certainly isn't paying attention to his government. He doesn't pay attention to anybody that opposes what his goals and objectives are. I mean, he's like a little kid. It's all about his ego. He's not paying attention to what anybody else is saying.
I forget which other.
His own little world, you know. I mean, as far as I can tell, that's true. You know, he never talks in complete sentences.
Well, you know, sure, but I forget which.
But I mean, he doesn't make any sense.
Okay, but
from point of view, from
to borrow,
he sounds like a child talking when he talks. You know.
Okay, but to borrow I don't remember which progressive radio indie media person said this, but it's like, I hate to always be in this position to defend Trump, because I feel like that's what I'm having to say here. But, you know, okay, so he isn't smarter than a fifth grader or whatever. Still, if we don't, I want to know, okay, Article 25, you said they can do this, but based on what? We're still not seeing, it seems politically motivated.
It takes two-thirds. It takes 2/3 of the cabinet to say that he's unfit for office. Mm-hmm. And if the cabinet thinks that a president is unfit for office or unable to fulfill his duties because of mental incapacity or physical incapacity, a lot of it has to do with if a president went into coma, and you say, well, we don't have a president, he's not going to be coming out of the coma for God knows when.
Well, we let George W. stay.
Then the coup would happen. The coup would involve the vice president becoming president.
Right.
Not like they're taking over the government.
Okay, well,
they're choosing. It's not a coup. It's only implementing the Constitution.
Okay, that's fair point. But if we're gonna get,
it is the point, you know.
Right, I hear you. A fair point. So, but if we're gonna, if it's based on they can't speak in full sentences, I mean, we left W in office.
That's very true.
You know, he could dodge shoes and stuff, you know, but he couldn't.
Yeah, it's
based on a consensus. That's what they were seeking. Is there a consensus that this individual, that the president is not in a full capacity?
Yes, yes, a cabinet that was deliberately filled with yes men, as is the case with almost every other fucking president since fucking ever.
It's not just the president's cabinet, though. It's nine of that level of person, which means Supreme Court judges, Speaker of the House, and President pro tem.
Oh, great! Oh, great!
I think this is
all of which are political allies. How convenient.
You're talking about the order of accession to the presidency? It's
no,
Vice President, Speaker of the House.
Article 25. It's nine people from the cabinet, Speaker of the House, President pro tem, and the Supreme Court.
Well, it's 2/3. It's 2/3 of
the number is 9, but it's 2/3 of the cabinet, but the cabinet members could be substituted by a Supreme Court justice, a Speaker pro tem, or the Speaker of the House.
I'd have to look at the Article 25. I haven't read it recently.
Yeah, that's what I was just reading. But I think to use the word coup in the article is misleading.
Okay.
That's inaccurate.
Coup, it's exploring the possibility that this constitutional
okay. Well, at least he puts that in there. But Kiriaku's coming from you know his story. He was targeted and put, you know, because he went against or exposed the torture stuff, and he claimed. I have his book. I haven't finished reading it, but
I don't think that Nancy Pelosi would ever agree to impeach him.
Well, no, because Pelosi Yeah, because Pelosi doesn't want to leave the possibility open of that possibly being used against her one day, okay, for whatever reason. So there's that, and she's like,
she wants.
You really think Pelosi is that smart?
No, I think Pelosi doesn't want to be in a position where she can't say that somebody else is preventing her from doing the right thing.
Right.
Okay. Kiriaku's book.
I struggle to get Pelosi in credit.
Is that the fellow that wrote the article?
Yes, this is John Kiriaku's book.
Okay.
Yeah, My Secret Life in the CIA's War on Terror. So he objected to what he saw, and I think he spent, was it 2 years in prison? Something like that. So he's pretty, let's see, in February 2002, he was head of the counterterrorism in Pakistan. Let's see, I don't know everything. He just spoke up, and he was a whistleblower, and they punished him. So, anyway,
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's great that you're here, Rich, and that you have, I mean...
Look, that man's probably someone who I would say is a patriot, you know.
Right. So, I guess all I'm saying, I think
I
it's
like
wonderful...
whistleblowers a lot, no matter what, who tell things the way they are.
Yes.
You know?
And see, I like the fact that you're here, and John, that you're here to challenge us, because, I mean, we have to look at all sides. You get too in your own, your own bias and your own bubble, and we do need to consider all of these things. But
Who put Article 25 up there? That was interesting.
Was that you?
Yeah, I'll share it again.
But we have to. Oh, you did. But we have to look at the fact that maybe, Rich, it's not the way it was when you were in it, and it is politically motivated, because it sure appears that way. And that's what I think is scary.
It's pretty late. I'm going to get out of here.
Oh, okay. Good night, Greg. Thanks for
Good night,
coming.
everyone. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kelly, Brian. Thank you, Rich.
Good night, Greg.
I'll talk to y'all again sometime.
Yep. Good
Hope
night.
so.
But I mean, I honestly like to be challenged, so I think that's great that you guys are here to speak up for, to point out the flaws in that article. It's important. But, it's really hard. That's just our natural inclination, I think, as Americans. We pick a side, and it's really hard to remain objective, especially when you have to go digging like this to get information, because our media fails at it so miserably that you have to spend all your free time looking it up yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So that's definitely the Russia thing.
What was really interesting about it, though, was that it was Ukrainian malware that was used, and it was actually the malware was used against the Russians, which is the same malware that they claim was used against Podesta. I thought that was always kind of interesting.
And what's
the butterfly? Yeah, it turns out there's a butterfly effect when you release viruses on the internet. Who would have fucking thought?
Well, it was all too, and it was readily available. So, I mean, in reality, knowing all the IP addresses were Tor exit points, it could have been absolutely anybody. I mean, it could have been the DNC hacking themselves, for all anybody would know.
Right. Mm-hmm. Good point.
Yeah.
You played yourself.
I guess I will remain skeptical. I remain skeptical without evidence. We can't know, and you have to look at motives, like who benefits from it being this way or that way, and I don't know. It's just hard, I think, for those of us that we still don't see any evidence. And now what's the latest with the Mueller investigation? Are we supposed to hear whatever at the end of the week, next week or something?
Oh, really?
That's
Is that what they said?
After Trump gets back from talks with the North Koreans.
I thought they were going to drag it out till the end of the year. But anyway.
Get back on top.
God, it seems to me that this thing of the investigation being done was done awfully quickly after the new guy was appointed. After Barr was appointed, like he was in, and then all of a sudden he said the investigation was over. you know,
Really?
that's that
Well,
happens. Things like that.
I think they'd have found something by
Connected, you
now.
know, is something that Barr said you're done, and you know,
Mm.
did he give him directions to end the investigation?
I just think at this point, really, there isn't anything. I mean, come on. Again, I don't like to be in this position of defending Trump, but I mean, come on, really? Ray McGovern says that, and a lot of these whistleblowers, like, they can find stuff. They know. So if they haven't uncovered evidence, it just seems like it's just a media circus to string people along.
Well, 24-hour news cycle, they're feeding the news cycle with all the.
I mean, am I wrong, John? You're kind of not. I mean,
Well,
correct me. Correct
Again,
me.
I would always play the devil's advocate in all these things. Either that, or they have to be super careful with what they have uncovered, right?
Gotcha. Right. Okay. So they can't.
Ways and means. They can't say, "Oh yeah, we were absorbing all the traffic at a bottleneck gateway, and this is what we've captured." Right? They might be having a hard time. So again, we'll never know.
We'll never know. And that right there is the catch, and how you'll never gain the public won't trust it. And I remember, even given my bias in not believing Russiagate, when I was watching those C-SPAN clips, with DHS, and they were grilling them, I thought, well, it's either one of two things. It's they don't have the evidence, or they can't show it, because if they revealed it, it would reveal other things. So I've always thought,
too delicate. What if it's? I mean, what if it's so damaging that it's attacking our faith in our country? I mean,
well,
it's delicate what they've uncovered.
I would rather know. I mean, I think that there's more danger in not knowing. But
or they're going to say, "Hey, we didn't find a thing." It could go in.
Well, 25 indictments of people that there were all kinds of contacts between the campaign and Russia. There's no doubt about that.
But those weren't related to anything about Russia collusion. Am I wrong? What was related?
Right, not directly related.
Well, I mean, what's going on inside Trump's head? He's still thinking about selling Trump Towers to Russia. He's still thinking about giving a $50 million sweep to Putin.
Right, but here's the problem, though. All of our, if you
where are Trump's interests? I'm sorry, Brian.
Right, but if you just look at the owners of the main cable news network, they all have corporate ties or business ties to Russia as well. So why aren't we focusing on that? I mean, the whole narrative that he's corrupt, I completely agree. The guy's corrupt as hell. But let's pin down what he's actually done.
Uranium One, everybody.
Yeah, there you go.
Uranium One?
Yeah.
But where did that go?
Do you know about that?
They just dropped it.
What's Uranium One?
See?
Should I do the fill in on Uranium One?
Yes, do that. Do that.
Completely,
Yay! Physics time with Snorch.
I'm completely unconnected from the government, so I'm not working for them.
Yeah, me too.
This is the inside story you won't hear anywhere else.
Make sure
I just mean that I'm not working for the government, so I don't have to worry about anybody putting the thumb on me.
Okay, definitely tell the science, but you got to tell the Clinton connection there. With all
Yes.
And don't forget, you cannot talk about the Uranium One, and I'll let somebody else fill us in on the Panama Papers, because the two are connected.
Yes.
Right.
So what happens is a component of nuclear weapons, I know there's another word we're not allowed to say, but component of nuclear weapons needs to be, let's say, recharged. It needs to be refueled. And that fuel originates in raw uranium. If you don't have the right flavors, there are 155 flavors of uranium. If you don't have the right mix of the right flavors enriched the correct way, you cannot refuel. So the Russians were running out of nuclear fuel, and they, through the Clintons, arranged to buy 20% of the United States uranium raw
Production.
raw, the stuff that isn't in your.
Is that yellow cake you're talking about? That deal was that?
Yellow cake comes after.
Okay.
Yellow cake is further on down in the refinement step.
Okay.
So in the early part, just the ore, 20% of the overall ore production was sold through Uranium One, and the deal was that Bill went over to Russia, gave a speech.
He got paid big bucks for that too.
Was it 700,000?
After he was president?
After he was president.
Okay.
But Hillary was
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, yeah.
Okay, so her position was she was able to allow or not allow the sale of this uranium. Normally, when somebody has nuclear weapons that are about to have their fuel become inviolable and no longer a weapon that can be used against us, I would consider that a good thing.
Me too.
However, a deal was cut. Bill got, was it $700,000 or $7 million for speaking
I
for
think
like,
it was in the hundreds. So
yeah. A very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
$50 to me would still be criminal.
Yes.
And then after that, she signed off allowing the Russians to get 20% of our fuel.
Damn.
But, or not our fuel,
Yeah,
but
damn.
at this point, it's our raw. So,
It's our rum. Why is it always the rum?
No, sorry. It's our raw uranium. I made a mistake and I said fuel. Fuel is what you call the enriched stuff.
Yeah.
So, if they didn't have the source material, their pits would have become unusable in their nuclear weapons, basically making us one of the few nuclear powers left with the amount of stuff that we have.
That would have been terrific. I'd like that a lot.
And it would have reduced the need for a lot of our war readiness.
Yeah.
Because pretty quick, when the other powers lose, they have to, pretty soon they would have had to start admitting, well, our bombs are duds.
What do you know?
Supposed to say that word.
She was in collusion then with the Russians to perpetuate their nuclear arms capability?
And that's only speculation.
Yeah.
Well, it happened.
And again, I'm not giving the government correction. I'm only giving the speculation based on the commercial side of it, from somebody from the industrial side of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What do you know about, okay, so regarding that, then Secretary of State Clinton ordered FBI Director Robert Mueller to deliver highly enriched uranium to the Russians in a secret plainside meeting in 2009. On behalf of the U.S. government, Robert Mueller delivered a sample of highly enriched uranium confiscated from smugglers in Georgia to Russian authorities for forensic examination in 2009.
That's a separate deal.
A separate deal.
Yeah.
I'm serious. That's a separate issue.
Okay.
And once you're talking enriched, you're talking about you're no longer talking about something that an amateur industrial person like me would know. The uranium deal was for the raw, and you get nowhere unless you have a tremendous pile of raw.
Okay, well here's one place, and I'll have to check a couple of different sources to verify, but there's one place says 140, this 20% of uranium supplies to Russian interests that they turned over was in return for $145 million in donation to the Clinton Foundation.
Now that sounds corrupt, doesn't it?
That's another issue.
That's another issue.
It seems like we have a full, what do you call the thing we put the feathers in, the arrows in, a full quill. No, that's not right either. A quiver.
Yeah. It makes me feel like I'd like to see AOC become president, because she didn't have any. I don't think she'd have that kind of problem.
If I can sidetrack for just a second,
Yeah.
to be senator in 2022. and she's eligible to take Schumer's position. And
Right.
you would have no trouble taking Schumer's position. Now back to the other side, but
Nancy and Schumer.
AOC would be capable of taking Schumer's position. She could not. AOC, I believe, would not be eligible to be president pro tem because of her age.
Right.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. Yeah.
But she could be senator. President pro tem would have to be eligible to be president, which means she would have to wait 5 months.
Oh yeah, right. She'd have to be
This is-
35. Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
but she could be a senator.
Oh well, I was just being I like who she is. That's all I'm saying. I'm talking about the legalities, whether or not what she can and cannot do at this point.
Nobody says that in
She's also ignorant in some ways too when it comes to things. So.
Yes.
nobody says that in 2028 she can't run for president.
Right.
And it's time for her to learn. This is early in her career. She's got the ambition. She's got the correctness. And all she might have some who didn't have some weird thoughts when they were 28.
Right.
I'm not even 28.
You're
speaking
not.
Back to presidential politics. What was the conclusion on Bernie Sanders in the earlier discussion? Was there any kind of decisions made or any consensus on what about Bernie?
For me, the verdict is still out. I would, at this point right now, I would reluctantly vote for him probably if there's not a better option. But I'm watching to see what happens. I want to see who he names as his running mate. I want to see if this looks like some kind of, operation to get people back in.
And that's the nicest thing about being in Iowa. When a primary time comes, we will start off with over 140 candidates.
Wow.
And we'll say, okay, people for this one, go over to there. Now, I'm going to have to read off all 140 names. But you can bet it's going to be down to like 5 or 6 maybe. And we'll put them in different groups in the room. We'll count off. And this year, we actually have to sign a piece of paper saying, I'm with this group. And that piece of paper has to be retained. That's a new rule. And that's fantastic. I think that record must be kept so that we don't have people saying, yeah, there's 25 of us.
Wait, now does Bernie participate in the Democrat, or is he coming in as an appendix?
In the comments, he's going to be a Democrat. Already, at the local caucus we had last Tuesday, the 2019 caucus just happened. It was overwhelming. Everybody there was basically Bernie would be one of the acceptable candidates for him.
Interesting.
The Hillary people didn't even come.
Yeah, today I saw Elizabeth Warren on C-SPAN. She did a meeting in New Hampshire, and I know a lot about her. She's an economist, and I think she has a lot. She has American family and poor people and thing deep in her heart. I think I have a lot of faith in who she is.
She's not going to make
I would have more faith. I would like to have more faith in my fellow Oklahoman if it wasn't for the fact that she had basically been telling fairy tales to people about her being a Native American.
I'm a Native American too, like she is. Like 40% of American people have some Native American blood. Heck, I can name what I have on my mom's side. I have Apache on my dad's side. We have Iroquois.
Right. Well, it's even less.
There are a lot of people have that I couldn't prove it.
Right. Well, here's the thing: the whole Native American thing wouldn't have been so much of a problem if it were partly if it weren't for the fact that she's been kind of flip-flopping on issues related to Native Americans, such like Standing Rock. After the battle's already been fought and everybody has started packing up and going home.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what she did on Standing Rock. I know AOC was there, and she was.
Completely ignored it.
Well, she was on the right side of that Standing Rock thing.
In Iowa right now, amongst the actual people everyone I talk to, Harris isn't even on the radar.
Who?
Not Harris. Warren. Warren is not even on the radar of making it into the Iowa.
Please don't let Harris be on the radar.
Right. That's not
I don't want her to be on the same planet.
Right
I'll
now,
tell you what I've seen Elizabeth Warren. I've seen a lot of I've seen many speeches that she's given back. She was invited to speak at a forum out in California. She gave a 3-hour speech about the American family in the last 30 or 40 years of our economy and why it takes two people's income to support a family or try to support a family these days. And it's because the corporations are in control of this country. And I think she has a good handle on that. She has a very deep understanding of what's wrong with our economy.
Well, she does.
She does have a good understanding of the economy.
She is a brilliant woman.
Until she stood up with Hillary Clinton and never stood with Bernie.
Well, that's just about it.
Oh, Hillary Clinton's not brilliant. She's a
No, I'm talking about Elizabeth Warren. She never stood up for Bernie, and then she just backed Hillary. So I'm sorry.
I don't know what
I will give Elizabeth Warren as much support in this next election that she gave progressives in 2016.
Right.
Zip.
Yep.
Elizabeth Warren has no support in Iowa for the people who will go out and knock the doors for her.
Well, she has been an independent. She has been a Republican. She has been a Democrat. She has been every damn thing all over the board. There's no doubt about it.
That's the least of her problems, right?
See,
But but Bernie Sanders has been a damn independent all his life. He's not a Democrat. That's one.
right. That's a plus.
It's not the party loyalty problem. It's not the party loyalty issue that's the problem here. It's the cause that she's put her horse in the race to back behind. And the lack of support for said horse that has become the problem. You can pick whichever horse you want. That's not the issue. The point is that once you pick the horse, you're supposed to actually put money in there.
Yeah.
Right.
It's sort of, you can go to Remington Park to bet on the horses all you want, but if you're not putting even a penny in there, you're not going.
See,
you shouldn't be complaining to the manager when you don't get the earnings.
Yeah.
Well, who did Warren bet on in 2016?
Yeah. Back to the people who are going to be knocking on the doors to say which candidates are going to be pushed for the Iowa caucus.
Yeah.
There was a thing called Draft Elizabeth, Draft Warren.
Right.
And she rebuffed it.
Rebuffed it.
Yes, back before the 2016 election.
Yep.
And I personally believe that she was told Hillary's got to just bow out.
See, this is what the
that sounds reasonable. That sounds like a reasonable.
This is what the Any Blue Will Do crowd likes to refer to as the purity test. It's called expecting a candidate to actually mean what they say, and and we vote on values, not on party. And they bash, as I was talking about, the bashing that goes on from some that are kind of got one foot in that Any Blue Will Do camp. They give us shit because they say it's a purity test. And for me, it's like, I don't care about party. I'm going to vote for the candidate that has the platform and the issues that I support. And that really hasn't changed. I voted for Ralph Nader in 2000. I don't care. I proudly say that.
But the next step is the vote really depends on how many people you got go out knocking doors for you.
Mm-hmm.
The people
and the machines.
Draft Warren switched to being Bernie as the second choice.
Mm.
When they all got behind him and she did not back Bernie, she lost whatever chance she ever had of getting back the people that knock doors. And they're all anti Elizabeth Warren here in Iowa. And losing in Iowa will be a major.
Yeah, there's no. I don't think there's.
That's a very interesting insight. That's something I'm glad to know from the ground in Iowa.
Yeah, a lot of us have a lot of respect for Elizabeth.
Yeah,
when she backed Hillary, Instead of Bernie, she
That
lost
was
her
it.
vote.
That was it. Because before that, she
Yep.
did a lot of stuff for consumer protection. I mean, I paid attention to that, and I think she was. I don't know. She just lost her credibility by.
I think really what I think she might have been able to survive that had that been the only thing that happened in 2016. Like if Standing Rock had not become a thing, there's a possibility I think that Warren could, with time, could have recovered. With some time and distance away from the 2016 election cycle, maybe could have recovered her reputation along at some point along the path. But after Standing Rock, it basically cemented any hope or doubts that had been laid against Warren and her ability to effectively be a leader.
The next point.
That's like she can't be an ally, but to be an actual leader in the movement, she basically lost the trust of the public. Of the progressive movement in terms of being able to be that front person.
The next point is in Iowa, when Bernie lost the nomination, Iowa lost 3/4 of its volunteers. The door knockers lost 3/4. In anticipation of Bernie coming back, we got 2/3 back.
Oh, wow.
Our major ones that quit the Democratic Party, I mean, major Iowa Democratic Party leaders who left came back just in case Bernie came back. So right now, if Bernie were to be shunned in any way, then the Iowa Democratic Party would again have a major collapse. We had no money to do anything. Suddenly, when it looked like Bernie was coming back in, money started pouring back in.
And see, that's where I have to say.
I love that. But I gave money to Bernie back in 2016, and they asked me to give money now, and I told them I wouldn't give money to Blue. What is it?
Act
Blue,
Blue.
Act Blue.
Yeah.
Act Blue. But I will donate directly to his political campaign, to his campaign committee. But I will not give any money to Act Blue.
I won't donate any money. I think I'm sure I'm not the only one. After Bernie, I don't think money should even be in. Forget it. I don't think
I'm with you there 100%. Them asking us for money, I think, is ridiculous. These things should be completely government funded at this point. And it's absolutely absurd that you would have a candidate who, again, said he was going to fight till the very end and didn't, and then comes back and says, okay, now give me money to help fund my campaign.
Right, no. Not happening.
I'll fund his campaign. I believe in Bernie. He's been my representative since 1994. And
I hear you. And you know, even though I said what I did before, that's why I'm on the fence, because it's just going to depend on what happens between now and time to vote. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't vote for him. I was a huge supporter, but I'm very skeptical, and I want to see what's really happening. And
which dovetails back to the discussion that has now been gone on for 3 hours and keeps getting diverted on sidetrack.
Who's number two? Who's after Bernie then?
Number 2 was Tulsi Gabbard, and I'll give the brief highlights. Military experience means that she's going to have a good chance of attracting support from veterans, provided she doesn't get SWIFT voted. Voted like Kerry did. She's quick-witted, cool under pressure. She has a good set of policies, many of which are already on Bernie's platform. But the one piece that she has above Bernie is a much stricter non-interventionist stance.
Yes, her foreign policy is much.
Yeah,
it's much more pronounced, and it's
completely agree.
Much firmer in terms of the principle.
And it comes from her military experience too. I mean, it comes from her being a veteran. She understands what's going on over there. She knows that we're not really making friends by being in those wars. It's caused us more problems than it's solving.
That was one of her strongest moments, and I pulled in both of my daughters at the time and said, watch this. Listen to what she says. When she stood down as the vice chair of DNC and said she couldn't stand behind Hillary's regime change wars. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. And I made sure my daughter saw that.
And proven she is willing to take calculated political risks to stand on principle. That is a huge benefit that very few, including Bernie at times, hasn't been willing to go as far out as she has, and she somehow managed. And see, despite considerable harassment from her colleagues, to not only maintain her position, but actually managed to increase her leverage.
And see, that's the difference
in terms of her political popularity.
Sorry to interrupt you. I have to say this. That's the difference when we were talking about her changing her position on gay LGBTQ stuff compared to Hillary. When have we seen Hillary do what you just said? Stand on principle even at political cost. No, she does the opposite.
Never.
Always. So
in
there's
fact, that is my biggest problem with Warren. And let me explain. She came out early on during the 2016, the primary, and went on a couple of news shows and talked about her issues with Hillary and that she had coached Hillary.
Right.
Hillary was a senator.
Right.
And Hillary was going to vote on this.
No, this wasn't when she was a senator. This was when she was still first lady.
Was it?
Yeah, it was when she was still first lady. Bill is still the president at the time.
Oh, there's an old video, right?
You're right. So there was a bill having to do with, I think it had to do with housing. And Elizabeth Warren was coaching her on this and said, look, you've got to talk to Bill. You've got to get him to go against this. This is going to hurt, particularly single women. And she said, you know what? You're absolutely right. After looking at it, I will get him to go against this. We'll push back on it, and we'll kill this bill. And what happened was,
that's what happened.
Money changed hands, essentially. The corporate men got involved, and they basically paid her off. She switched her decision, and
Elizabeth Warren said,
"No.
This is what Hillary did."
Okay, I love Jimmy Dore, and I don't want to get in trouble with him. I'm just gonna, for a second, you guys can. I'm not gonna actually play it, but here he covered it. He talks about it because it's got that old. Here it is. That's the clip of the old video of her talking about the very thing. That's the exact thing you're talking about, Brian. I remember.
Yep. So she knew what Hillary was and what Hillary represented, and for her to still back her after that, I'm sorry, you've lost all credibility at that point.
Even in 2016,
particularly when there was a better candidate in Bernie, and you gave him the cold shoulder.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
Right, and see that's the same thing for like Beto O'Rourke. Like he didn't back Bernie when it mattered. You know, he didn't do anything, and then he comes out for Hillary. You can almost stomach some of them that backed Bernie and then decided to support Hillary because she was the nominee. But it's the ones that never even came out for Bernie's platform.
Well, Warren would have been a superdelegate, right, at the time.
Actually, that's a good question. Was she on the superdelegate list?
I don't know. Hang on.
Yeah, she had to be. Just like my congressman here, John Yarmouth in Kentucky, superdelegate because he's a congressman.
Right.
But every Democratic congressman is a superdelegate and representatives. Yeah, they're part of that. At least that's the way I understand it. If I'm wrong, I could be wrong.
You mentioned Tulsi's attributes. What are her issues? What are the issues that he brings forward?
Okay, so Medicare. So positions she shares with Bernie. Medicare for all. I am not. I believe free college tuition is also on her platform. I could.
Yeah, I think it is too.
Is it? All right. I know she's also wanting to do something on student loan debt.
Right.
Existing
She has
student loan
talked
debt.
about
I don't know if it's a forgiveness program or if there's if it's a full forgiveness or if there's some kind of a work step program that she has in mind in order to reduce that debt. All right. So the biggest one is reducing the American military's foreign footprint. As well as as well as that of the American intelligence community. Now, I have to preface this that what she's specifically focusing on is the intelligence community's role in foreign regime change.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. What was the comment?
In order to prevent incidents like the rise of Pinochet and the Guatemalan juntas from staining Americans' moral. What's the word I'm looking for? Moral standing. There it is. America's moral standing in the world. On top of I think Tulsi does have a fairly comprehensive platform, and of all the candidates thus far, I think she has the most comprehensive foreign policy of the three that I think are the most likely to be able to beat Trump. Now, she does have potential vulnerabilities in both her stances on the war on terror, as well as she's kind of one of the Sam Harris liberals who I draw the comparison to Sam Harris specifically on her stance on torture. However, I would say that in comparison to Sam Harris, she's a lot more nuanced in her approach, which is about as kind of a phrase as you can use when discussing the ethics of torture. But basically her stance on torture is that the violation of one person's human rights does not outweighs the need of protecting the lives of thousands, which is understandable, but it does reek of a sort of Jack Bauer mentality that I think lends itself to a very slippery moral slope that in part was what led us into Iraq in the first place. Now, the other issue is her stance on gay rights, which we've already covered, so I'm not going to reiterate that. The third possible one is related to her best strength, and that is her anti-interventionism stance.
Or what?
Because
anti-interventionism.
Or I guess to put it in more concretely, it's anti-regime change policy.
Oh yeah, okay, great.
So this, which ultimately leaves that there's going to be some undesirables in the eyes of Americans that have to be left off the table. This would include figures like Bashir al-Assad, Nicolas Maduro, and pick a Middle Eastern leader, Middle Eastern or Southeast Asian leader.
Okay, I knew there was some.
This has led her to being described as everything from an Assad apologist to a Maduro fanboy, and recently has exploded due to an ironic backlash accusing her of being an imperialist now, because apparently people took a look at her appearance on The View and thought that she was, because she wasn't in lockstep with full lockstep in Bashar al-Assad's complete and total innocence with regards to the Syrian conflict, that she was boasting imperialist propaganda and therefore is not a real interventionist.
You know, somebody needs to go on The View, like Jon Stewart went on Crossfire, and say, this is what's wrong with America. Get this off the television. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just had to comment on that. I can't stand that show. It's awful. I just see clips of it. Rarely, but...
Can I just...
That's one of my favorite. Jon Stewart on Crossfire is one of my favorite things, you know.
Where he's just like, just stop doing this.
Can I just expand on that thought about the View appearance? Because this is something I've been wanting to blow off for some time. And I need... I trust you guys to understand where I'm coming from. So I feel fully confident in this, but I need to say this.
Okay.
If you're one of the people who thinks that because Tulsi Gabbard concedes the possibility, is willing to concede the potential possibility that Assad has used chemical weapons at some point during this conflict, whether or not that actually is true or not, or whether or not he is guilty of war crimes during this conflict, if saying that stating that you can have that opinion and still not hold an anti-interventionist stance, I would like to just say, for the record, get the fuck over yourself. No.
Well, okay.
No, seriously. No, because hold on a second. Because let me make this clear. The whole point of that just because we cannot have a position on anti-interventionism which is based solely on the principle that we cannot say anything bad about any foreign leader fucking ever.
Right. Right.
I have never said that about Russia, and despite my own personal skepticism towards the Russian investigation, I have no doubt that that Vladimir Putin is not an honest actor, an honest or moral actor. I don't think anybody who's watched his behavior, especially for those on the left, could ever hope to claim that. What we should be denying, is the rush to fucking hysteria that usually associates with this.
Here's the problem.
And Tulsi Gabbard, believing whether or not she believes that Assad may have gassed his people, is irrelevant to the fact that she does not believe that the limited evidence provided is sufficient justification for a military intervention. If that isn't a sufficiently decent cause for you, defensive interventionism for you, then frankly, I'm beginning to wonder if you're honestly serious about actually stopping wars, or if you're just doing this because this is your fucking ego talking.
Again, you're asking people to think. And what people want to do is just pick a side. It's black or white, one or the other. It's not these nuances of gray. And it takes someone like, I think she exhibits those signs of being a leader to be, confident in that, saying that we don't know. And not just, I just think that's the way we think. Most Americans it's one or the other. We're not comfortable with the not knowing what the whole story is. I mean, what I paid attention to with Syria and chemical weapons was Max Blumenthal's reporting, actually, which was really good on that. And he talked about the white helmets, I believe, and how it looked staged. But yeah, you're right. I mean, for people to swing so far the other way and say, for her to just even question that there might be, and to jump on that, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. By the way, let's not forget that this is over one fucking comment. One.
What was the comment exactly?
Over against the 6+ year history of anti-intervention, policy advocacy.
What did she actually say?
One statement.
By Tulsi Gabbard, yeah.
What did she actually say? I didn't see it. Do you know what the quote was?
All right. So this was during the exchange between Tulsi Gabbard and Meghan McCain.
Okay.
And during which the usual tagline of the usual tagline of Assad gasses his own people came up. Now, while our personal skepticism here on the show may be that that's likely not the case, Tulsi was willing to concede this point. However, she further rectified that even if this is the case, what has generally been proven by the history of our interventions in the past is that we leave these countries not better off
Right.
without their current leaders, but we end up installing potentially worse regimes that are at best serving as puppet states that neglect the needs of the local populace, or at worst actively attempt to suppress and brutalize the populations in order to advance American economic interests, as was the case in most of Latin America.
And Iran, for instance, yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, let's not forget Iran while we're at it. Or Vietnam.
Hey guys, I hate
President Dim was a very interesting fellow.
I hate to cut it off, but I'm at my limit now. My headache is
Okay.
kicking
Then
in.
I'll
But
rush
this
through
has
them.
been great discussion, everybody.
Well, you have a limit on your time.
I'll rush through number
My
3 then.
spinal, no, not on the Zoom or anything. I have spinal fluid leaks, and I can feel my.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
the weather's
So-
bad now, and the barometric pressure affects it a lot, and so I've been sitting up a long time, and I can feel. Most of you've already heard this story. When they first discovered it, I had no spinal fluid in there, and my brain was resting on my skull, and that doesn't feel good.
Ouch.
No. So I'm going to go lie down before I end up not being able to get up tomorrow. But
Alright.
this has been
Why
great.
not,
I-
Samika?
All right,
Huh?
let me get to number 3. Let me get to number 3.
Go ahead.
Real
Wrap
quick,
it up.
Elvis.
Number 3, Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang to me is the wild card in this entire fucking equation, because Andrew Yang is the only one right now talking about how to safeguard America's economic solvency going forward
Yes.
into the remaining half of the century.
Yes.
His UBI proposal isn't something that's new. It is one that has been previously proposed by even a conservative economist like Milton Friedman. Granted, when Milton Friedman proposed it, it was also tied with the specific precondition that people who are on UBI don't get to vote.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
They don't get to vote?
No,
Yes.
they're not supposed to vote because Milton Friedman's argument was if you let the people on UBI vote, then they're going to vote for
They're just going to increase vote for increases to their UBI.
Right. We need to
Yeah.
keep it, the corporate welfare, not the.
Milton
helping
Friedman is an economist that was very popular in the 60s and 70s and has been, for the most part, largely debunked since then.
He was also a huge supporter of Pinochet, so I don't know what that tells you.
Hey, speaking of
Let that
Yang,
speak when you will.
speaking of Yang, I did actually finally message Carly, is it? But it was when I was in Florida and I was really distracted. So Mitch, sorry. I'd love to talk to him. If he wants to look at CFAR or CWAC, we're going to be updating it with a real election integrity component, which is going to include John's creation, I hope.
Okay, and I will be talking to them about that on March 11th.
Oh, okay, very cool.
In the meantime, Andrew Yang is the only one that mentions me in his speeches.
Oh, okay, very cool.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
So,
All right.
So far.
One last thing. Now, Andrew Yang is without a doubt his strongest position is on the economy.
Yes.
However, I do think that he does have some institutional and maybe one policy concern that I do have withstanding at the moment. Institutionally, he's an Asian American businessman, which screams about as much trustworthiness to the average white American as Donald Trump's hairpiece does to most of the general world populace.
What?
Okay.
Okay.
But I saw Yeah, I read the interview of Andrew Yang and all of his positions on it. I thought it was a very interesting conversation.
And I say this as an
a conversation we should continue in this country.
Yeah, we got to get going or we're going to hurt her.
Okay, yeah. Bye, Kelly. She's going down. She's going down.
Okay.
all right.
See you guys next time. All right.
Good
Sorry
night.
about that, Aeolus.
All right.
All right,
Well,
good night.
We'll try again later.
Yep.
We'll continue this.
Yep, we will.
Yeah.
Good discussion,
Later.
everybody. All right.
Enjoyed the
Good night,
conversation.
everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Good
Have a
night.